Hi, I'm John Saul. I'm recording this video as part of a Masters of Educational Neuroscience degree. This is for a subject on learning and memory, a neuroscientific view of that. As teachers, we need to be aware that the brain needs to be ready for learning. The brain is inherently social, and we need an understanding of how the brain works to support students within our educational settings. A researcher, Blackmore, explained that a large proportion of the human brain is involved in social interaction and understanding other people. She wrote, "The term social brain refers to the network of brain regions that are involved in understanding others." Here's a sketch of the brain showing the regions called the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior superior temporal sulcus, both of which, importantly, are involved also not only in social recognition, but in learning and memory. It's interesting that the medial prefrontal cortex is developing more in teenagers and will be for at least 10 years until somewhere between the ages of 25 to 30 years. It plays an essential role in the cognitive process, regulation of motion, motivation, and sociability. Research also indicates that these parts of the brain in humans undergo structural development, including synaptic reorganization, it's a reorganization of neurons, during adolescence. In terms of students wanting to learn and being able to learn effectively, it's becoming increasingly evident that facial expressions, physical contact, and eye gaze connect us in constant communication exchanges with those around us, including our students. A teacher's encouragement, properly balanced with an appropriate level of challenge, activates a number of hormones, pleasure hormones particularly, dopamine, which is the pleasure and reward hormone, serotonin, which involves mood and learning, norepinephrine, which involves attention and alertness, and endorphin, which is a stress hormone. These are induced at levels that are conducive to learning with good contact with students. How does this all translate to the classroom? To activate cognition, first activate the social brain with communication. One way to do this is to have small groups discuss some concept learned in the previous lesson. This also involves repetition. As they're discussing the concept, they are repeating, which is one main way of transferring ideas, thoughts, learning into long-term memory. It's very useful to have a group do a summary of a concept on a whiteboard, being free to make additions, corrections as they go. Works very well with small senior classes. Also allows you to teach how to do summaries that work. Concept maps, in my mind, are the best. Think, pair, share is a technique that can be used and report back to the class. This works well in terms of repetition and understanding of concepts. So the brain has been socially activated. What next? The hippocampus, which means in Greek seahorse, because it was seen in 1587 as being that shape, is important, very important actually, in memory formation. The hippocampus is crucial in forming new memories that are spatial or declarative, that is, involving facts and events, termed explicit memories. That is, it is involved in everyday memory making. People with hippocampus damage, including dementia sufferers, can't form new memories, even though they can still remember past events. For teachers, there is a new problem that we have not really experienced before. There are many studies that are showing that the adolescent hippocampi are smaller, not as developed as in previous generations. This is attributed to the amount of screen time teenagers are involved in. The brain always tries to conserve energy, so as screens scroll past the eyes, the hippocampus determines that no effort needs to be made to form new memories or to transfer new ideas into long-term memory. It's interesting that the capacity of short-term memory or working memory in recent studies has reduced from 7 plus or minus 2 items to now more research is showing it's about 4 plus or minus 2 items. If some sort of rehearsal does not occur, items are held in short-term memory for just 20 to 30 seconds. Here is a simple model of memory formation. We have sensory input there on the left in this diagram. Some of that information is lost if it's not acted upon by immediately. If we pay attention to it, those input goes into short-term memory, and we can maintain that in short-term memory by rehearsal. But anything that is unrehearsed is lost in 20 to 30 seconds. Then when we encode that, summarize it, make concept maps, form chunks, in various ways, we can transfer that into long-term memory, where it still can be lost if it is not looked at on a fairly regular basis, if there's not repetition. We retrieve that into our short-term working memory for use in everyday learning or in exams. So what are the classroom strategies in order to bring about good learning? I think the first one, which is incredibly important, is focusing on the students' intention to learn. If the students intend not to learn, they won't. So consequently, it's important that every student says that they intend to learn. They won't retain anything that's presented if they have no intention to learn. For items to be retained in short-term memory for longer than 20 to 30 seconds, there needs to be some rehearsal. Some rehearsal in class time can be done by the teacher going over the same thoughts again, or by students doing some activity which causes them to actually make use of what they've learned. This, as suggested there, this can be done by presenting the material again, students perhaps explaining it to a peer, explaining it to a class or a teacher, and making some sort of summary. I find group summaries are very useful. Regular, short, non-summative quizzes for the sole purpose of repetition are a useful way of transferring data from short-term into long-term memory. Such quizzes encourage retrieval of concepts, not just simple recall. Retrieval involves some awareness of how the process of memory is working. Further, repetition during the period when the concept was first introduced is important, but also in multiple periods after. Spaced repetition is seen as best practice, where the repetition occurs a day later, a week later, a fortnight later. So you repeat the concept over days and weeks. Assignment work for the sole purpose of having students process a concept to be learned is important. This also helps retrieval or learning how to learn. Chunking is seen as an excellent way of transferring ideas into long-term memory as a unit rather than in parts. If the same thoughts are chunked together, then the learning occurs of the whole chunk and not just part of it. And the retrieval is then more likely to be the whole chunk rather than just a part of it. This is just an example of a chunk, or actually a number of chunks, that I did just for the sake of demonstrating it. So if we talk about memory, we talk about three things: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. This is going back to the memory model that I showed earlier. And then if we're talking about sensory memory, we're talking about a number of things there, and more could be included in that. If we're talking about short-term memory, there's also a few things that are included there, and long-term memory. So chunking is seen as a very good way of transferring from short-term or working memory into long-term memory. Thanks very much for watching this. I hope you've gained some benefit out of it.